Forged secretly in mortuary archaeology's hottest furnace, it's Archaeodeath.
Well, yeah, hello there.
Welcome everybody to another Archaeodeath Doctor Who exploration with myself, Professor Howard Williams, and my partner in time traveling crime,
Rabbi Hannah. It's nice to see you guys again.
Hello, yes,
And
and we've had a
it's
bit of a
always
break.
good to do anything with you.
It's great to be here with you. And we are going into series 12 of the revived 2005 to 22 Doctor Who. So series 12 is the second series with Jodie Whittaker. We enjoyed elements and were frustrated by dimensions of the first series. We're now into series 12 and we have 10 episodes and a special to go through. And as for previously, we're exploring the archaeology and theology of Doctor Who, where we can navigate this complex series of time traveling plot lines. And we have interesting plots to explore in series 12 that take us around the galaxy and to different historical periods of Earth's history. And shall we crack on with Spyfall parts 1 and 2?
I think what I would like to say, overarching, I don't think that this series, or season, as we say here in the States.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine.
Aluminum. Aluminium.
Aluminium. I think it does not have the. You can see the writing is up and down. It does not have a very cohesive writing element to this season. And I find that to be the most frustrating part in rewatching, or for me, watching this series, because, we've seen points in Doctor Who previously that you and I've talked about where some of the episodes are written really well, very strongly, and then the one right after that seems to be written by, kindergartners. And I feel like that's really where we find ourselves now. It seems like more though the kindergartners had more of the writing than actual writers this year. And I hate to be that person, because I know a lot of people put a lot of great work in this. I think Jodie Whittaker is an amazing actor. She does a wonderful job as the Doctor, and she can only do what she can do with the writing she's given. So
we
I'm hoping as we go forward,
love the team, don't we? They really work as a team. We like the characters. That's not our contention here. That's not our focus here, but they are great characters. But Spyfall 1 and 2 is about mysterious aliens on Earth, and it's really very much about an episode about anxieties regarding technology and big tech. And with Stephen Fry makes a guest appearance. This is the Lenny Henry one, isn't it? Oh, am I getting confused?
No, I believe that Stephen Fry makes I took a note here. I believe he does. I know also that we are rejoined by the all-time baddie, and that's the Master. And I feel like that at this point in the series, we're just revisiting the same kind of villains that we've been seeing.
Yeah,
we understand it's like the bread and butter, Cybermen, Daleks, the Master. They're coming back over and over again. Yeah. And while everybody who plays the Master has brought in a new kind of vision, this one is not my favorite.
No,
and I like the actor. It's just the way they present him is not my favorite. And I'm not, obviously I'm a Jewish person, so this idea of like this cyber, like technological Nazi theme that is happening in Spyfall 1 and 2 is not my favorite. I understand it evokes a lot of emotions for people when you get kind of like Nazi themology, it makes people feel things, but for me it just makes me feel like it was really lazy writing.
Yes, so they start off in the contemporary with the bad guy who's the tech boss, Daniel Barton, founder of the VOR or VOR search engine and global mapping, and he's Lenny Henry does good baddies. Lenny Henry should have long played more baddies. He's in Blood Origins, The Witcher Blood Origins, he's a great baddie. Not everyone liked that series, but I thought he was great in it, and he's great in this. He's that kind of, that sort of has a human side, but he's long lost it. He's he's a socially he's obsessed with transcending national boundaries and controlling military systems, robotics, biodata, but then we jump back to 1834 and meet Ada Lovelace, and then we move to the 1940s in Paris, and we meet an SEO agent, and so we get some historical personalities and a sort of British Asian agent, special agent. So there's a bit of sort of back to basics, sort of let's go to history and meet famous people, which is fine. But it kind of just yeah, I agree with you. It doesn't quite play out.
It doesn't set up this series for a very strong turnout for me. And I love the Doctor, it just, and I love the companions. I love Yaz. I love Ryan. Graham, I think, is one of my more favorite companions of the series. I love their interaction, and I even love the interaction of the Doctor between herself and her fam. All right, fam. I love that. Yeah. That kind of like modern colloquialism. But equally, the rest of the writing, like the writing about surrounding them and their connection to each other, is great. And there isn't much theology in here. I mean, yes, we can point to this idea of, racial purity when we go to the 1940s and the kind of rise of it, the Hitler regime and the implications it had on Roma and Jews and everyone. But there isn't really a lot of theological aspects of Spyfall 1 and 2 for me.
I certainly didn't see anything of archaeological or specific historical note beyond they travel through time. So maybe we just go on to Orphan 55.
Orphan 55.
So this takes us to a planet that is a spa. So it's a leisure facility. Another uncanny trope in Doctor Who is a pleasure dome or pleasure space on a luxury planet where everything seems safe but everything goes sinister, and this is a repeat theme.
We've seen it with the Rose and David Tennant.
Yeah, and here we are with creatures left behind when the planet goes toxic. The Dreg are a native species and they're indigenous, so I suppose the theme is about supplanting indigeneity with leisure resorts, which has a sort of environmental and cultural theme to it that is vaguely anthropological. But then we find out another horror, a sort of Planet of the Apes horror, that this is Earth. My God, they
did it, Charlton Heston. You damn dirty
damn you to hell. Yeah, there's that moment where they realise Orphan 55 is Earth, when they find a Siberian underground train or something similar, and the creatures can breathe CO2 because they are an adapted human
race.
Yeah. So we are on Earth on a. Is this supposed to be an alternative reality?
Future.
Because it's left really hanging. Because we've seen Earth and the great civilizations of Earth of the future, but the Doctor didn't know this version of Earth existed. So it doesn't make any bleeding sense to me. But it's an interesting, uncanny future past archaeology of Earth in the future. That's a good theme. I like that. But it was left hanging as a sort of moral lesson.
It doesn't really tell us if this is an alternative reality, if this is like an Earth that she's never visited before. We do see like some themology that is important to at least theology in terms of this idea of supplanting the indigenous population with things that people believe are better than the indigenous population. And I do really believe the idea behind this is because we see ourselves currently in kind of this climate crisis. And Doctor Who does try to be very timely. It tries to draw from themes that we are surrounded with at any given point in time. We've seen that historically throughout all of Doctor Who, going all the way back to William Hartnell. So I think that is part of this. And it does speak to me on a certain level, being an indigenous person to Turtle Island, this idea of like, we're going to supplant the indigenous community with things we think are better. So for me is interesting. And I do believe it's trying to be timely with this idea of like extrapolating out the horrors of climate change. This is what can happen. Do you want your future selves to be like, dregs who are living off CO2 and
the monstrous
exactly, and all of the archaeological record to be like completely overwiped. So I think that was what they were trying to get at. For me, it doesn't play out very well. It's certainly not compared to the writing of earlier seasons.
I think that episode could have been the foundation of a longer storyline where they explore how do we stop this future horror and the humans turning monstrous. But it kind of just ends as it's just one future. So very unsatisfactory conclusion. And doesn't make any sense in relation to the story arc or the meta narrative, but it plays with those themes of future archaeology, which I'm always interested in, of them uncovering traces of the past, whether it's Statue of Liberty and Planet of the Apes, or it's underground trains. I like that dynamic. It's very uncanny.
Well, especially when it's trains for you. You see you see
absolutely.
trains. That's a themology
Underground
for
trains,
a professor.
overground trains, steam trains, and any train. So yeah, that was perhaps the closest of interest, but just frustrating as a narrative. But then we go to Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror. Any thoughts on this one?
I don't see a whole lot of, theology here, for at least not for me. I enjoyed the episode, and obviously, I could talk about kind of Victorian era superstitions and things of that nature, but it doesn't really get into that as much as like some other things, like, again, we're in a place where the earth is threatening to be destroyed. We have another queen involved, which, I always kind of like it when they pull in, yet the doctor has met yet another queen. At least she's not trying to marry this one.
It's always women who are causing all the trouble, you notice.
I do notice that, and I'm proud to be one of them. But we're worth it. Let's not pretend for a second that the women who cause trouble we've always been worth the trouble we cause.
Anyway.
Matron. So I enjoyed it, and I think there's more in terms of like the themology of archaeology in this episode than there is theology for me.
I mean, certainly a historical setting, 1903, you meet famous person, electricity, the dawn of the modern age, business and greed versus genius and poverty, those whole tensions, and aliens just thrown into the mix. I like that whole dynamic. It's a nice self-contained episode in itself. So yeah, that's one of the better ones, I think. And another evil queen is vanquished by the Doctor.
Yes, I liked this one, and again, the things that I liked most, that I honed in on most in this series, was the companions and the Doctor and their dynamic. Their dynamic to me was much more interesting sometimes than the actual theme of each episode. Watching them interact with each other, watching the way that they have developed a sense of real family, different than we've seen in past iterations of the Doctor. We've seen a lot of iterations of the Doctor where there's a romantic vibe. We see a lot of iterations of the Doctor where there's the best friend vibe, going back to Peter Capaldi and, the Impossible Girl, like Clara. They were best friends. They were not like romantic. But we haven't really seen this sense of a fully formed family. Even when we see Matt Smith with Amy and Rory, that is a best friend situation. Amy's his best friend. Rory is like, Mrs. Pond or Mr. Pond to the Doctor. We see romance between Amy and Rory. But this is literally creating an airset familial pod. And in terms of the way that they interact with each other, you have like the grandfather figure, that is going to be Graham. You have kind of like the mother figure, which is the Doctor, and then the two kind of children involved, which is Yaz and Ryan. And they really have sort of created a family. And I think it's important to the dynamic of the Doctor themselves, because the way the Doctor experiences family, they haven't really, which we kind of learn later in this series. I'm sorry, I kind of went off on that, but those are the themes that I pick up on more so than the actual writing of like the bad guy of the week almost.
Thank you. What about episode 5, Fugitive of the Judoon?
Okay, so I actually really liked this one. Amazingly enough, I really connected to this one. And of course, anytime the Judoon are involved, I know I'm going to have a great time watching it with you, just because your lyrical expertise when it comes to the Judoon.
A platoon of Judoon singing a tune with a spoon.
And I'm gonna say this to everyone who watches and listens to us. If you've been with us for a while, you know that the professor has this penchant for rhyming the Judoon. So I can if you can imagine us watching this together, and every time a Judoon comes onto the screen, the professor is literally rhyming the Judoon with something. And it only kind of adds to the appeal of watching anything with you, because you always have these kind of quips that you add that I find interesting.
So for me, this is really interesting for its use of the contemporary landscape and archaeological sites, because we encounter a woman with a story, a hidden story. She's living a life as a mundane person, but the Judoon are hunting her down, and the doctor's there. And I mean, the plot aside, we find out that Ruth, this woman, is another iteration of the plot is another iteration of the Doctor didn't know about. And the architecture, the landscape of the Severn Estuary is absolutely key. So the Severn is the biggest river in the island of Britain that rises in the Welsh mountains, connects up through the spills out into the Shropshire Plain from Welsh Pool through Shrewsbury, and then does an arc and heads towards the Bristol Channel, where the last great city, Roman legionary fortress at Usk, and then subsequently Gloucester becomes a Saxon and Viking town, a cathedral city of the later Middle Ages, a trading port that is subsumed and replaced by Bristol, but is a major trading city up through the 19th century of Gloucester. And Gloucester's cathedral, famous for the coronation of Henry III, famous as the film setting for Hogwarts in Harry Potter in the cloister. The cathedral of Gloucester is used as the setting because Ruth is a tour guide, a rather failing tour guide around Gloucester Cathedral. Now I'm going down to give a talk next month in Gloucester Cathedral as part of their public outreach about death and archaeology. So I'm very excited to go to Gloucester soon again after many years. But Gloucester Cathedral is a beautiful medieval construction. There's other famous church, the Golden Minster in Gloucester, which has Anglo-Saxon early medieval sculpture and architecture still surviving. Gloucester is famously associated with many historical characters and personages and events as a cathedral city, and so they use this historic English city as the setting. But it's not just any historic city, because they've matched that with the fact that Ruth lives in a lighthouse overlooking the Severn Estuary. So she's mapped. There's two locations that are really important in the episode: the cathedral and the centre of a historic English city, and then this idea of an isolated life where there's a gravestone without an inscription in the marshes, this isolated life. And that, I think that pair of geographical locations play well in the story, because Ruth is an enigma. We don't know who she is. As I've already revealed, she is an iteration of the Doctor, and the Doctor is meeting herself, but she's a mystery who lives at the center of human life. You know, she's a tour guide, she sees people, and then she has this lighthouse out in the marshes where her parents are buried, and the gravestone without an inscription, we find, is a gravestone, a marker place for the TARDIS itself. So it's a funerary archaeology of the TARDIS. So the Doctor races out to this gravestone next to the lighthouse and this isolated, because I should have said the Severn Estuary leading into the Bristol Channel is miles and miles of wetland, and historically was a sort of the border between England and Wales. It's a zone of liminal space, and so that was a very conceptually powerful place to hold the Doctor as a prisoner, a not self-opted prisoner, to escape the Judoon. As with John Smith in the episode with the family of blood, the Doctor has become human to escape the Judoon, if I remember rightly, to escape the Judoon, who we learn are being employed by the Time Lords to chase her down. So we get this whole idea that the Doctor has made the option to try and not be the Doctor, and then Jodie Whittaker Doctor uncovers the truth that she is hiding in plain sight to defend herself against being on the run as a prisoner of
Fugitive, yeah.
The Fugitive of the Judoon. Sorry, I hope that's a long waffle, but I'm trying to explain that I think the landscape is really important, and a historic lighthouse and this cathedral city and the cathedral are a good juxtaposition of this character who is the Doctor, but is the Doctor in hiding, and she has this fabulous sort of get up that sort of, I think, plays to her the iterations of the Doctor as different kinds of 18th, 19th century gentlemen, male gendered, masculine, costume, but clearly a woman and a black woman. The color combinations, I think, play off that very well. So this is not
I love
I
her
think it works
outfit.
very well that this is, of course, the Doctor can be black. We obviously now have a black Doctor, but of
Judy,
course
yeah.
but a black woman first appears as the Doctor in this episode, and with a costume that fits her personality, and together they get back. They go to the Doctor's TARDIS and face off against the Time Lords. But yeah. So I thought that was a really good twist. Yeah.
For me, I loved her companion. First of all, I love how he allowed the Judoon to believe he was the Doctor in disguise as a way to protect her. And this kind of shows how deep sometimes those companion Doctor relationships go. He understood, like he was their lifetime with her. Like whole protecting her secret, never letting Ruth know that she actually is an iteration of the Doctor, just going on with their day-to-day life. And the whole time he's the one who knows that Ruth is the Doctor. He's had
and not for the first time, but it's quite clear they have a long-term established marital relationship in every regard. There's no attempt to deny that. We don't, obviously it's a kids program, we don't see that, but we are given the sense these are people that have lived long together, are familiar with each other in every daily routine, and that's where the episode starts. And so that sense of long term, and of course there is connections to other episodes. The Doctor has a vision of the destroyed Gallifrey. We know there's links to later plots, but it's an interesting standoff in the end where it's the Doctor kill Ruth version of the Doctor. The past Doctor is the one who is more brutal than Jodie Whittaker's Doctor and is basically kills her enemy.
But she kind of explains why. And so, like, to circle back for just a sec.
Yes, cool. Sorry.
What I like is that, like, I can't imagine the amount of stress that her companion, that Ruth's husband, endures because out of a sense of loyalty and love. Because, like you said, they have a marital life together, and he's the one who knows who she actually is. He's the one who holds on to that secret and then allows himself to be taken out, basically, to protect her. He says, "Oh, it's me you want. It's me you want." It's not. We find out he's just been her companion, but we don't know. We don't see the beginning of their story, so we don't know if he's just like, "I'm gonna be here with you and I'm gonna protect you," and that developed into a marriage when she became human. But for whatever reason, he is like all in. He's the like last dance for her, where he's like, "No, you run. I have this." And then I think, as you said, we find that the Fugitive Doctor is much more brutal than we've seen in past Doctors. But if we look at the time period that the Fugitive Doctor is supposed to have had her iteration, you almost understand why. She's almost like the War Doctor, born out of this sense of war and agony and survival. And I love how she portrays that so well. And plus, in the middle of this, she's grieving. She gets herself back, realizes, shit, this person who I've been, and sorry for the language, she's been living with and loved and been married to for a lifetime, has been now murdered at the hands of these bounty hunters who are employed by her fellow people, like other Time Lords. I would be, you've heard me say that a hero will sacrifice you to save the world, where a villain will sacrifice the world to save you. And in those moments of watching The Fugitive Doctor, I think to myself, if I was placed in the same position, there are people on this planet I could not sacrifice for anything. And she's faced with that. She's faced with the fact that he sacrificed himself for her. And of course, that feeling of revenge. And she hasn't healed her trauma. Let's be real. She has not healed from her iteration. What's interesting to me in the writing, however, Professor, if I may, is that she is so hidden that even Jodie Whittaker's doctor doesn't know she exists, even though they're the same. And the canon has said that the doctor always remembers their past selves, that they know that they're different, but they have memories. That's why they recognize people. Oh, I met you as, you know, Sarah Jane. I know Sarah Jane, or, the lieutenant, Bridge Stewart. I know all of these people, but she doesn't know her. It's interesting to me, this idea that this iteration of the doctor is so concealed that even Jodie Whittaker's doctor doesn't know who she is.
So we're halfway through the series. Are there any additional themes from Spyfall 1 and 2, Orphan 55, Nikola Tesla and Night of Terror, or Fugitive of the Judoon that you'd like to raise?
So this is the thing. There isn't a continuing theme. And we've noticed in previous series that even though we kind of have that bad guy of the week, you have your weekly idea, the weekly, thing they're doing, there seems to be like a meta theme going throughout the series. We don't see that really.
No.
In this series. It just seems like a thrown together mishmash of written episodes, written plots that they kind of threw spaghetti at the wall, saw what stuck, threw it together, and created this series.
Well, let's deal with Praxeus then, shall we, and see what you think of that.
Absolutely. Let me get my notes on that one.
This is alien bacteria take over the plastic and get ingested by birds, and it's an environmental theme again. And the bacteria fight back and save the day. But it's basically that anxiety about a global threat of rubbish everywhere from Peru infecting the birds, and then and we all find out it's aliens are fault, traveling across galaxies to find a perfect laboratory. Sorry.
And they're doing it on purpose. We think the same people. I will say that what I do find interesting here is that Jodie Whittaker's doctor wants to trust everyone.
Yeah.
And I kind of identify with that. You notice that you find out she trusts these aliens. She just takes them at their word that they're out there in the middle of nowhere doing these tests, and that they're in the front lines of trying to fight these birds that are like going off the rocker. And she literally is there trying to trust them. And I identify that as someone who wants to take everyone in good faith and wants to. And I know when we go back to last season, she talks a little bit about her religion. When she's marrying that couple. She says, on my planet, our religion is love. And so I think that is kind of what guides her in this idea of trusting everyone.
Very trusting.
But sometimes that trust kind of is to her detriment, which we see here. I'm going to just trust everyone. And she seems almost more naive than her earlier doctors.
Yes.
Like Matt Smith came across as a little bit naive, but it was his charm. That naivete was his charm. And to her, she's more irreverent. She has that little more naivete, but she also has that like embracing everything she comes in contact with. I just want to embrace it. I just want to love it. Maybe if I love it enough, it'll be better. I find that interesting. And with this, it's kind of that she sees these people, she automatically trusts them, automatically believes everything they're saying is absolutely, from the mouth of God, that they're being honest with her. And when she finds out they're not, does it change her in the future? No, she's still going to be who she is, and she's still going to trust everyone, even though kind of time and time again, she's learns not to. Are there a lot of archaeological themes for you in this one?
No, I didn't see anything apart from obviously the material culture and the anxiety about plastic pollution on a global scale is a theme that archaeologists are not only, as others academics are, tackling and trying to shed light on and investigate. That's interesting in itself, but there wasn't a fundamental, archaeological theme beyond that I could spot.
Yeah, not really too much in terms of like theology here for me either. It's more about like just the things I'm picking up about her and the way that I think she moves through the world as this regen of the Doctor, and how she sees the world is almost through the eyes of almost childlike behavior, that like giddy sense of excitement and wonder. And I do like that about Jodie Whittaker's Doctor. She kind of has that, like, everything is brand new to her over and over again. I like that. Yeah, I just, but I find this to be not a very strong episode, if I'm being.
Well, at least the next episode, Can You Hear Me, has an overt theological themes because it involves gods causing carnage to help pass the time, destroying planets and imprisoned one creature between the two planets for eternity. So we actually get this kind of big sort of cosmological story of gods being trapped. And yeah, that's really interesting because, and also from a historical or archaeological point of view, of course, we have a jump back to 1380 in Aleppo in Syria, a sense of Islamic physicians and caring about mental health, and a psychic dimension involved in that. I thought was interesting.
So for me, in this one, definitely has theological themes, and it harkens to this idea of gods being petty and being fighting amongst themselves that we see in, especially in Greek and Roman theology. We see some in Norse theology too, where they didn't always get along. They wanted to show each other up. They wanted to show who was the better of the gods. And we really kind of see that in this when they're they thrive in this idea of causing chaos and kind of like trying to prove who's going to outdo each other and who's going to like trap people and who's going to free them, who's going to be the prisoner of their, I did like that because I've always enjoyed Roman and Greek mythology because of this idea that they were almost human-like in their efforts against each other. There was jealousy and rage and anger and thievery, and we see that kind of play out in this episode amongst these gods, the Zelen and Rakia, a couple of immortal gods, and Rakia is the ally, but she's been trapped, and these two planets against each other. It's an interesting theme for me, theologically speaking.
And it's all a trick to try and get the Doctor to break the lock, isn't it? So that's why the girl in Aleppo is being targeted, and it's all about sort of worst fears being manifest as a way of drawing the Doctor in so that they can break their prison bonds. Another theme of imprisoned ancient horrors as well as gods, which we've seen in the Satan pit or whatever it's called. We've seen that theme come through before. So I mean, medieval historical setting showing a relatively civilized Islamic Middle Ages, which I think is a useful antidote to the usual sort of backward portrayals of Northwest European Middle Ages, but then we sort of segue into the theme of the gods in conflict. I thought it was really interesting.
I thought that one was very interesting, and again, I think it also plays on this iteration of the Doctor's kind of naivete. Like, they're trying to get her to come and break this lock for them, and trying to use her empathy. Look, she's trapped. Kind of use the empathy to get her to do it. So I find this one was pretty interesting, and I do like that kind of ends with them showing up at the door of they're gonna go and visit Mary Shelley, and I have kind of a love of Mary Shelley just because Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is based on the Jewish mythology of the golem.
So this is into the haunting of the Villa Diodati on Lake Geneva in 1816, where I mean, there's a number of interesting archaeological themes here, or things that are interesting. It's a historic setting. It's famous characters from the past. It's Byron and Shelley and the Shelleys, and the sort of the bad summer of 1816, the dank and frigid. It's all, we find out, is caused by the Siberian and the lone Cyberman that's been warned. Captain Jack warns the Doctor. Looking for the Siberium, and has taken the Siberium, has become hosted in Shelley, but it's created a perception filter to hide the house. But there's that's an interesting plot line in itself, which has themes of the human, the possession of humans by the monstrous forces, the Frankenstein, the animated golem, as you say. But there's also the fact that Dr. Polydor has a collection. He's an antiquarian. He's collecting, and he has relics that have become manifest as in human remains and trophies. And one of the particular foci in this immediate, in 1816, the year after the Battle of Waterloo, is that Polydor has trophies not only from Waterloo itself, which was a thing. Trophy hunting from the battle was rife, and in Britain and elsewhere in Europe. But also he has bones of a 15th century soldier from the Battle of Morat, or Morat, which is linked to Lord Byron's Canto 3 of Childe Harold's Pilgrimage. So this idea that the literary works of Byron are used and connected into the artifacts that are in the Villa Diodati. So you have this idea of these are toffs, right? They're collecting shit, but they're particularly collecting military leftovers, relics of war, and of course the irony is that they're being visited by a Siberium, the ultimate Cyberman computer, and that is the ultimate battle computer in many ways. It's the Cybermen's form of power. So you have this idea of sort of dilettante collecting of relics of human conflict and death in a curiously ghoulish way, and then a haunted house that is created by the Siberium, which is the ultimate future battle computer. So you have, it does, I suppose, allow us to think on human mortality, artifact collecting, but also the uncanny of, and the sort of war, and our obsession with it, collecting and honoring it and writing about it. I suppose those are the themes that I got out of this.
Now, there's a couple things that I find interesting. Obviously, that we're with the Shelleys, Mary Shelley being the person who is the author of Frankenstein. Also, we encounter Lord Byron, who I will just say is a total fuckboy in this episode, but equally is kind of a callback to Spyfall 1 and 2, because he is the father of Ada Lovelace.
Yes. So there's you should have said that. Yes, there's a connection.
There's a little bit of a callback there, which I find interesting. And so we see they meet Ada Lovelace, and then now we're into where they meet, Lord Byron, and Lord Byron is literally hitting on everybody. That man is just like, he is DTF,
including the Doctor. Yeah,
including the Doctor. I think that they allude to this idea that this encounter with the Cyberman and what happens to Shelley's to Mary Shelley's mate or husband is this idea that's where she gets this idea of writing Frankenstein. I think that's what they're alluding to in this episode. We know that Mary Shelley wrote it based on Jewish mythology of the golem, and the way that the ancient Jewish myths of the golem. But I found that kind of interesting that kind of allusion is happening there. I do think it's interesting that, again, we see earlier Jack Harkness, like you mentioned, warns the Doctor about the lone Cyberman, and don't give this to him. Do not give this to him. And what does she do? She's like, but I feel bad. My empathy has been driven, and so I'm just going to go ahead and do it anyway. And
she's a bit of an idiot in many ways.
Yeah,
in this.
She is. She's kind of idiotic a little bit.
Kind person.
Yeah, I get she wants to act out of this empathy. She wants to act out of like this sense of humanity as it is. But equally, that sense of humanity has not always done her well.
No.
So yeah, I liked it. This one actually I found very interesting, and I found interesting that they humanized this lone Cyberman to an extent, because there's a point where you see there's a baby involved, and he refuses to touch the child or harm the
Yeah.
child because he remembers his own child, and so will not
Yeah. That's really
harm
good.
them.
I forgot about that. That's a really important theme about humanity and
Yeah, they try to
legacy
inject some
memories,
humanity into
legacy
that.
moralities. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I find that was interesting, and just kind of the callback to this idea that now they're visiting almost a lineage. They visit and interact with Ada Lovelace, and then later on they visit her father, literally while he's still in his DTF, and the gentleman who wants to duel everyone. That was just kind of, I don't know if that was a throwaway, that doctor who just wants to duel Ryan because he doesn't like what Ryan says, so he's like, we're going to duel, and you see the other character discussing, oh, not again, like he duels everybody. He that sense of masculinity at the time was like,
I
if you
think that
say
is
anything
not
bad about
that's
me,
not inaccurate, is it? Is that because at the time, that
it's not inaccurate.
1810s, I think that was the height of I can't remember the exact history of dueling, but it was a thing in the 1810s, 1820s. I also like the obviously this is a haunting. This is about ghosts, and the ghosts are manifest in the, and I didn't fully it's not the Polydori's collecting relics, but it's the skeleton of the warrior who comes to life, the 15th century soldier who comes to life as a hand, and we don't never get that properly explained why the hell it's doing that. It's like it doesn't make any sense. And then looking for the toilet because he's a bit thick, is Graham. He doesn't understand they don't have toilets in the 1810s, but I think that's comedic, but he shows just what a bit of a thicko he is, but he's a nice thicko, but he's he's a lovely, he means well, but it's a comedy. He's looking around the house and he comes across these ghosts. Well, he doesn't know they're ghosts, but and that's never explained, so you have this idea,
Nope.
well, there's ghosts, but who are they? I like that aspect, that there's an incomplete narrative there, and I like it. But I think overall, if I was going to be a judgmental about this episode, it's a failed version of the Van Gogh episode, where the in the sense that they're trying to connect to historical individuals. Yeah, Byron's a twat. The Shelleys, it's inspiring the story of Frankenstein because the Cyberman is the inspiration. So there's a sci-fi Doctor Who explanation for the Cyberman, but also the animation of the dead is part of that story as well. The animation of the 15th century warrior. So it's not just the Cyberman that's the inspiration. It's the animation, or the perceived animation, of the antiquaries of Dr. Polydor that create the. It's at the end. It's like let's put some sci-fi into the 19th century and expect it to work. It doesn't have
Absolutely.
the same emotional connection of the Vincent episode. Yeah.
And I think what it comes down to, you're not going to ever get another episode that was as well done as Van Gogh. That one hit every. That one hit, and if they're trying to strike lightning again by introducing us to Byron, introducing us to Shelley in the same way, it's not going to hit the same. No. Van Gogh, that episode with Van Gogh was penultimate. It was, beyond expectation, and this just doesn't do it for me.
But the final, the connection that is interesting though is that linked the way that Shelley, the Cyberium is taken out of Shelley, is the Doctor manipulates the Cyberium into thinking Shelley's dead, and then he said, "Oh, it's an old Time Lord trick. Push the mind to his death, and the Cyberium will then relinquish." So basically, the Doctor, I don't know if we've come across this trick in the original Doctor Who series. The idea the Doctor can trick other people's minds, can do mind games. It's very Vulcan, very sort of
very Vulcan
mind. But where did that come from, and how does that manifest? It's again a loose end that's frustrating. But what it does do is we're left with a character who knows how long they've got to live, and it's not long. So Shelley knows they don't have long.
Yeah, it literally is that summer it's supposed to happen.
So it is a sad. There's a sadness to it that, again, I don't think it's effectively fully done and resolved, but at least it plays with this idea of great people who die young, and the Doctor's involved in them understanding something of their own mortality. But yeah, I'm not saying it fully works out, but I like the dynamic of the Cyberman, the Cyberium. Yeah, not botched.
It's interesting.
It's unresolved.
It was
and frustrating.
fun.
Yeah,
Like, it was fun. And again, this is one of those instances where I almost like enjoyed watching the companions and the way they interacted, like Brian interacting with the gentleman who wants to duel him. Like you said, Graham trying to find a toilet because he has no idea, that those don't really exist in the way that he understands them at the time. I liked it. And it was a little comical with Byron being portrayed as just wanting to, be with everybody. And I always find that Jodie Whittaker kind of comes off as, I don't want to say asexual, but like just not interested in that type of like relationship style. You've seen a couple times where other people have kind of flirted with her. Jack Harkness even a little bit, but let's be real, Jack Harkness would flirt with a dolphin if he thought the dolphin would consent.
The Deep. So he is like the Doctor Who version of the Deep from The Boys. If you haven't,
I have not watched The Boys, but I'm going to take your word for it. He definitely kind of has that, like, I might as well just do whatever I want.
If it moves, he'll do it.
Yeah,
and if it doesn't move, he'll still do it.
Yeah, it's pretty much like, and so, but I do think that in terms of like someone like Jack Harkness, I think he actually does love the Doctor. And so for him, it doesn't matter what form the Doctor comes in or presents as, because I think he has an actual genuine like love there, whether it's romantic or not. It's just, that kind of loyalty and that sense of loyalty. For me, it was interesting. I enjoyed it. But again, this season is kind of hit or miss for me. Like, it's really like,
So this is part of a longer series of 3 episodes about the Cybermen, because the Cyberium, we learn, has been sent back in time to try and stop it destroying humanity. And then the Doctor has to jump forward in time to find where the Cyberium came from and to try and save humanity. And I must admit, for the next 2 episodes, I kind of lost interest and engagement completely. And I'm not sure I'm even motivated to summarize the plot, because I can't really say I understood it, other than I will give you one archaeological dimension. I love the idea of the cyber corpses in space, the remnants of massive battles, and I like that aspect.
I did like that. I did like the vault. I loved the vault, this idea of like this almost mausoleum, because that's what it seems like, even though the master, and we see the master again, and we're introduced to this idea of vault where all of the dead like Time Lords are, and it kind of gives you
the Time Lord vault. Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes. So yes. So that's in. So we get the idea of the timeless children. And the idea and the ruins of Gallifrey. So that's another archaeological dimension. We've seen visions of it, the final ruin of Gallifrey, and the Time Lord Cybermen. But the idea is never properly explained. There's a matrix of all Time Lord consciousness, living and dead, and the lived history of the race, a trove of secrets. And that's a very archaeological theme, is that a whole people have a place that the master has accessed. So he's learnt the whole trove of the Time Lord secrets, and then and then he uncovers the story of Tectuin, this explorer of the Shobogans, made up name, who travel in space. They're the first inhabitants of Gallifrey, and they find the timeless child that we find is the Doctor. Anyway. All I would say is I like the idea of a hidden history within a vault, a secret store of memory for the whole Time Lord people. It's not fully articulated or explained, but it's a great idea. And this idea of memory and the horrors of secrets that lurk within an ancient civilization, and the vanities of the Time Lords, and they've created their own identity as Time Lords, is an act of conceit, because that's not even their real people's name. But we do. I mean, I suppose the idea of memory and the power of memory and the vanity of that of a people who store up this tradition that's all built on basically stolen tech of the Doctor, stolen DNA. They butchered the Doctor's DNA to become the Time Lords. Is really quite dark and colonial, this idea of, created a glorified story for themselves, an imperial story of conquest and being the overlords of the universe, and it's really based on theft and pillaged bodies, I suppose, is quite a theme worth reflecting on.
So for me, I see it a little from a different angle, and here's what is interesting to me. We open with the ascension of the Cybermen, and we open with this child, this foundling, being found by an Irish couple, being raised. He falls off a roof in the pursuit of trying to, he becomes a police officer in Ireland and harms himself, but he doesn't actually get harmed. And they're like, we don't know what happened. Why aren't you in any pain? Why aren't you injured? And then, that's how it kind of opens. And then it's kind of interspersed with what's happening. And we find out that this person, this Irish person, is not really an Irish person. It's like literally, like you mentioned, it's a matrix that holds the memories of the doctor. Now, to me, this is a way for the franchise to shoehorn in and retcon the origins of the Doctor and create this idea of how to get past this idea of only 12 generations. So it's set up that every Time Lord gets 12 regens, except the Doctor. And the reason the Doctor has more regens is because it turns out the Doctor is the beginning of all Time Lords. That, like you said, the person who found the Doctor is kind of racing the Doctor, doing all this DNA, doing all these tests. You find out that the Doctor just regens and doesn't remember those early iterations, because those early iterations are put into that matrix. Including all of them. And so what's interesting to me is when you talk about this idea of like the manipulation, it also kind of reminds me of the creation myths that we find in the Bible. Because we just see the master talking about there's first the woman, and there is the Doctor, the woman who is raising the Doctor, and there's the Doctor. And then suddenly, where are we finding all of these other people that suddenly are showing up? It's like almost parallel of kind of biblical myth of creation there. So I find that interesting, but it just seems like it was a way for the writers to shoehorn in this idea that the Doctor's going to get more regens. And this is how we're going to make that happen. We're going to write our way out of our own origin story, our own barriers. We're going to break through that. And this is how we're going to explain how we can do that. Like the Doctor gets more because the Doctor is the center of Gallifrey. The Doctor is the center of the Time Lords. They are the first. And so they're going to regen as long as we keep watching, basically. So that's for me. I enjoyed it. But I'll be real with you. The one that I enjoyed the most from this season, if I can be quite frank, is Revolution of the Daleks. I mean, even though we have the Daleks again, we're presented again with Chris Noth's character, who, as we know, is kind of Trump-coded, if we're being
Trump-coded, I like that.
We get Jack Harkness again, and like, who literally goes to prison for 29-30 years just to be able to rescue the Doctor, gets mad at her and says, what did you do with the Siberian? And when she just looks at him, he goes, oh, you gave it to him. Like he even knows. He knows her enough to go, look what you did. And this one was probably my favorite. Out of the entirety of this season was the freaking special.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because we have it's a Trump kind character tries to exploit Dalek tech, doesn't know what the Daleks are, and guess what? The Daleks turn on them. The plot is mostly harmless. There's no real archaeological element. It's contemporary. My only point is I would just like to observe that the Michael Gove, when he was quizzed as Justice Secretary in 2016 by Sky News and asked for an expert that endorse Brexit, and he said people in this country have had enough of experts, and they have a throw-in line where Noth's character says, "This is why people don't like experts." So it's
true. There's an
in-joke there. There's an in-joke there about Brexit and failure to actually pay attention to experts and so on. But apart from that, I forgot to say in the previous episode with the farewell of the farewell. No, it's in this episode. Sorry, forgive me.
It's this episode. Yeah,
in this
it's
episode,
this episode.
the farewell of Ryan and Graham.
And Graham. Yeah, I find that to be really interesting. I find that we know that Harriet Jones is in fact a better prime minister than the one that were delivered in this episode. Harriet Jones, prime minister, best prime minister. That one got me when Graham and Ryan, and I understand why they did. I understand why Graham wanted to spend time. He's like, I know that is really the dilemma of any companion. You've now seen the world, you've seen the universe, you've seen time and space. How do you go back to just being human on Earth? But I think that Graham wanting to spend time with his grandson was like, I want to be there for Ryan. And Yaz deciding, I'm not done. Because I think in some way, Yaz sees the doctor as maybe a big sister, de facto mother, that they want to still grow with them. And I find that interesting. But I found this one to be my favorite episode. And I don't want to know where Jack Harkness had hidden that vortex manipulator. I think we have an idea. He doesn't have to tell us.
It does end on a high. Actually, you are right. It is a good episode. And it has, as well as I talked about the archaeological filming settings being important in relation to
you pointed to the
Gloucester Cathedral and the lighthouse. And this episode, of course, where Ryan and Graham are seen back on Earth is Garth Hill near Taffswell, not north of Cardiff, with vistas on a brilliant day where you can see out the Bristol Channel and out over to England and the Vale of Glamorgan, and in the background on Garth's Hill there are Bronze Age burial mounds and a trig point, so you get a archaeological set of monuments as a setting, and a dramatic upland setting in South Wales as the final setting of season 12. So
I love that part.
Yeah,
that was the highlight for me, and that I'm hoping that when we go into Jodie Whittaker's final season, that the writing is better, that there's more continuity between the episodes rather than this kind of hit or miss that we've witnessed during season 12.
Well, let's just say you get an annoying scouse. So I shouldn't be mean about that. No. There's a wonderful Liverpudlian new assistant which we can enjoy. Anyway, but beyond that, yes, we've got a short final season. They don't even muster a full season. It's 8 episodes and a special for our next exploration. I haven't.
And then I'm looking forward to, and I'm gonna say it, I'm looking forward very much to seeing how they explain the return of David Tennant's Doctor, and getting into Nechudi Gatwa. I have managed to avoid all spoilers.
Well, I don't want to guess, but I think we should do an episode where we go through season 13, and then
absolutely.
And the special, The Power of the Doctor, where the 13th Doctor faces her final battles against Dalek, Cybermen, and the Master again. And hopefully we can get rid of that, and then start to explore the David Tennants as a separate,
that's what I was thinking too. Is that I think that we should take this and then take David Tennant separately, and then we get to watch together Nechudi Gatwa. We've never seen, either one of us have seen that, no. And neither one of us has seen David Tennant. So
I watched a few of season 13 on my own, but I haven't. I'll need to refresh myself with that, because it's been a while. But thank you so much, Rabbi.
It's always a pleasure. In fact, I have an idea, and we'll talk about it after. But I have an idea for what to do when we're done with the Doctor.
You're full of ideas.
As always, it's always a pleasure to spend time with you, doing anything really. But this is one of my favorites.
Yeah, thank you, and great to see you. And we shall be back for more archaeology and theology of Doctor Who very soon. Take care, everyone.
Bye, guys.
If you've enjoyed this Archaeodeath video, why not check out the Archaeodeath blog at howardwilliamsblog.wordpress.com.